Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. If you don't know Gino Unfiltered, he is a force to reckon with in Montgomery County politics. He is the decades long president of the Montgomery County Government Employees Organization, MCGO, the County Employees Union, which is also UFCW Local 1994. The Montgomery County Education Association, MCEA, the teachers union, is the county's largest, but MCGO's membership covers the other county agencies and the county government itself. Department of Transportation, Health and Human Services, Environment, and the county police. MCGO just finished its political endorsement interviews of candidates running for county offices, council, and executive. They are yet to announce their decisions, but in the interim, Gino Unfiltered agreed to an interview on the county's political history, the role of unions, the challenges of economic development, taxation, and rent stabilization. Stay with us. I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society functioning precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from the Baltimore woodwind wizard Seth Keibel. The songs come from his album No Words. Seth Keibel himself on clarinet, flute, and tenor saxophone, Sean Lane on piano, Scott Giambusso and Bob Abbott double bass, Sammy Arifin guitar, Mark Carson and Wes Crawford drums. The album was recorded and mixed by Blake Alphen. You can find Seth Keibel's music at sethkeibel.com. Gino Unfiltered, welcome to I Hate Politics.
Thank you for having me.
In Montgomery County, the primary elections matter more than the general elections because of the preponderant nature of Democratic voter registration. Primary elections are 120 days away in June. How do you and MCGO distinguish between candidates?
One, we're looking for bold leaders. And what I mean by that is leaders that aren't afraid to stand alone on particular issues before the council. People that don't subscribe to the herd mentality. With past councils, their goal was to have unanimous votes on as many items as they possibly could. That was just their practice. We're not looking for that type of leadership. We want folks that will stand on principle and folks that will stand for what's right and what's wrong. And not just for the workforce, but the community at large. So that leadership style is extremely important to us. Secondly, we're looking for folks that have the skill sets that we believe are necessary to build coalitions on the council. So effective, good legislation is passed, again, not just on behalf of the employees, but the community at large. And we also want folks that understand that we need to figure out a funding formula that is not partial to one segment of the service portfolio that the government delivers, but a funding formula that adequately funds all county services.
Do you mean by that a overwhelming part of the budget goes to education now, and that's a problem?
Well, education is very expensive. It's a big operation. It's got the biggest workforce of all county agencies. They got a lot of moving parts. They got buildings, they got equipment, they got buses. It's a very expensive service that requires a lot of resources. And we understand that. And we absolutely support quality education. We absolutely support the competitive compensation of the entire workforce, both in the classroom and out. However, from our members' perspective, we believe that the council and executives, there have been executives that tend to prioritize education over other services. That reality is underscored in past budgets that have been adopted over the years, particularly when we're in economic downturns.
Such as?
Such as HHS, Health and Human Services, recreation, libraries. The only ones that weren't cut to any significant level was your public safety, because there's not a lot of fluff in public safety. And that, you have to maintain a healthy or a robust public safety infrastructure to keep the community safe. My members are concerned about when the cuts come, not if, because they will, at the rate we're going. Is it going to be at their expense again?
Now, you mentioned that you want the leaders to make decisions that are good for the community, not just for the workforce.
Correct.
By and large, there has been a strong preference within the community for protecting education over all else. How do you balance that community need with the benefit you're looking for, with workforce protecting them and making sure to bring them along?
The only way we stand a chance of doing that, quite frankly, Sunil, is to provoke and have a dialogue, a adult conversation on what the primary obligations of this government is to the community. Montgomery County continues to try to be everything to everybody. We can't do that. That governing approach is unsustainable. And every time one of the council members or collectively come up with a new idea, they add pressure on the budget by creating a new program or something, and not understanding that once they put it in the budget, it takes a lot to take it out of the budget. So what they keep doing is increasing the stress and pressure on the taxpayers, on the employees, and on the budget, and they don't give that a lot of thought.
So what would you take out?
Well, I don't know that we have to take out anything. I wouldn't start from that perspective. If I was the person in charge of determining priorities and the transportation, public safety, education, health and human services, etc., I would make sure that we set a table and invite all the leadership of the various stakeholders, community leaders, obviously political leaders, council leaders, county executive, agency heads, labor leaders, and get in a room and talk to each other and collectively identify the critical services, the must-do services that the county needs, and then figure out how to adequately fund those services.
Do you think that's not happening now?
Not to the extent it should be, and not to the extent it used to be. Those conversations used to be had.
What years are you talking about?
During the Duncan administration. He would bring all the parties together before even submitting his budget. And we would be in a room and we'd talk things through. He'd be very clear about the resources he had available to him. He would be very clear about where the pressures were, both in service demands, revenues, political, etc. And he would put that on the table. And then we would have conversations about meeting the pressures, meeting demands, sharing the resources as best we could in terms of funding the services. But those dialogues stopped.
When did this stop?
After he left.
So with Ike, with Leggett?
Despite my encouragement to get those conversations started again, he did, but they weren't as comprehensive and routine as they were under the Duncan administration. Now, Elridge hasn't had those conversations. At least I haven't been invited to them. You can't develop budgets in a vacuum. There's value to having community forums and hearing from the community, but that's information that then has to be triaged in terms of, is it viable? Can we afford it? So those dialogues have to be filtered down to a smaller decision-making body to determine what the priorities are and how do we meet them. That's what's missing.
You said that you are looking for leaders that stand alone. You also said that you're looking for leaders that can build coalitions. Now, those seem contradictory to me, but you square the circle.
Well, yeah, on the face of it, they do seem contradictory. But what I mean about individuals that will stand alone, I have a problem with people on any legislative body or any governing body looking to their left or to the right to see how their colleague's going to vote. What I'm talking about is someone that will argue their position and try to enlighten others as to why we need to maybe do something a little different. Herd legislation is not, in my opinion, effective.
But a herd is a coalition.
No, I understand that. Yeah, I've been in a labor leadership role since 1980. And I sit on various governing international board, AFL-CIO, et cetera, et cetera. I come to those meetings as an individual leader with certain principles and goals that I adhere to. But in order to move the respective organization forward and meet the needs of that organization's constituents, I have always been able to convince enough people on that governing body that this is in the best interest of the institution, but more importantly, in the best interest of the constituents or the people that we're responsible for.
Let me ask the larger background question here,
Right.
Which is, you obviously want the community and the workforce to be in sync with each other. For the last 50 years, we have in the United States lost union membership. The influence of unions have waned. How do you see the role of unions in local politics and local government in particular? Sometimes what happens is people say, oh, you are pro-union, meaning by that you're against the people. Your example of community meetings for budgets implied that. You get all this input from the people, but it needs to be triaged in respect for what is viable and possible within an institutional context. You see the tension there?
I'm going to speak directly to public employee unions. There's another reason why private sector unions have diminished, because a lot of industries have left. But in public sector, that's the most heavily unionized workforce in the country. The role that we try to play is understanding that in terms of how we communicate with our members, we constantly reinforce with them that we work for the public. We don't work for the politicians. So we are a public asset. And it's imperative for us as a workforce to deliver the highest level of services. And we also make sure that government is being run as effectively and as efficiently as possible. So the public assets that I've referred to, the workforce, are being properly utilized, supported, well-trained, well-resourced, so they can deliver the highest quality services possible. And then the other thing is that we pride ourselves in cultivating and maintaining collaborative partnerships with all our employers. Montgomery County, our relationship with Montgomery County is probably one of the best that we have with all our other employers. The county workforce has been under contract since 1986. We have a political infrastructure and enough of the management infrastructure that accepts the legitimacy of the union and the role they play. And why is that important to the public? Because there isn't a whole lot of labor unrest in Montgomery County, at least with us. That's by design. We could approach this differently, slay dragons and throw bombs, but that's not our style. Because when you start that, the membership become the casualties of that relationship. We will engage to make sure our membership is treated as the professionals they are, that they're competitively compensated, and they have decent benefits to take care of their families. If the county provides that, quality services come with it. But we also are not afraid to do things differently. I'll give you an example. For years, I've been advocating the restructuring of the county's service delivery model. I thought we were going to get there with County Executive Elrich. We brought in an outside consultant. They put together a blueprint for us to follow. We're talking about a government delivery service that hasn't changed much since I was a county employee starting back in 1977. Think about that. Demands have changed. The demographics of our clientele have significantly changed, but we're still doing things the same way we did them in 1977. The county has so much capacity to maintain services. The money that we have to make the best of it. So my vision was to figure out a different way to structure the workforce and not necessarily save money, but divert money from one part of the workforce to the front line.
Do you mean cut central office positions and pay more to frontline workers?
But we're not talking about cutting. There's a difference, because we're not going to advocate the cutting of anybody's job, whether they're managers or not. Unions don't do that. Repurpose those positions. And it helps alleviate the continuous increase in workload that my folks are faced with every day. And it reduces the stress, and it will enhance productivity and enhance services. I'm convinced of that.
And you said there is a consultant's report identifying specifically, department by department, what to do?
It gave us a roadmap on how to analyze the value of each position and so forth and so on.
But that analysis has not happened.
The analysis would not happen because the county executive and the CAO never allowed it. We never moved forward. And that was a missed opportunity.
How long have you been waiting for this?
The consultant rendered their decision, I think it was about 5 or so years ago, but it was pronounced dead by the second floor. And the council constantly was asking the executive, because we essentially promised a product which was never delivered. And he got beat up by council, namely Councilmember Friedson. You guys promised a redesign or a product. Where is it? Well, it never came to pass.
Now, twice you have said that the county executive, Elrich, has not delivered, say, on the consultative process in the budget, and now this report, no movement on that. But County Executive Elrich has given you some of the biggest raises you've received in a long time. How do you see that legacy?
I've known the county executive since about 1986 when he was an activist in the teachers union. He's a friend. I have enormous respect for him. But there's a difference between being a council member and an executive. Two totally different skill sets. He has certain personalities within his inner circle that have disrupted his legacy. They've damaged his legacy. Because had he proceeded with his philosophical goals, and particularly the ones that the two of us were aligned in, we could have done some great things together. We could have. But unfortunately, he allowed people on his team getting away with that.
He'll be back in his role where he has the greatest strengths.
Yeah, he will be. I believe he'll win.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think this is likely. There is also differences between McGeo, your union, and MCEA, the teachers union. How do you coordinate between different unions? Where are the pain points? How can this be done better?
There was a time when we did coordinate.
So when was that?
It was during the Kramer administration.
Oh, 92, 94? That's a long time.
It was a long time ago. All the unions came together. Us, the teachers, SEIU, the administrators at the school board, firefighters, and the FOP. And we all came together, and what we ended up doing is creating an organization called MCPEC, Montgomery County Public Employee Coalition or something. And we had bylaws and we had elections of officers and the whole thing. And during the time period that MCPEC existed, we did exactly what you just alluded to. The county labor movement during those days had much more influence on the political outcomes, the budgetary outcomes. But because of leadership change over the years, primarily at the teachers union, that kind of fell apart.
When did it fall apart?
Yeah, Bonnie Cullison was Delegate Cullison was the president at the time. It kind of started slipping back then. And people got frustrated. And so essentially everybody went in their separate ways.
What are you doing to put Humpty Dumpty back again?
I've had a couple meetings with the new leadership of the SEIU and MCA, and there's an interest to try to get back there. But it's going to take all of us getting back to the table.
A central concern in Montgomery County and Maryland is economic growth, economic development. From your perspective, how should the county address this?
Despite what elected officials in Montgomery County profess, I don't think there's enough of a commitment and political appetite to really put together a robust economic development strategy. We don't have one. It's unfortunate because all you got to do is ride around the Beltway, ride north. Economic development is occurring everywhere except Montgomery County. That's crazy. We got some of the most brilliant minds in Montgomery County, but we can't figure out how to trigger and cultivate a robust economic development, which if we don't, we're going to fly the plane into the mountain. We're going to fly it into the mountain. And then we're all going to suffer the consequences of that. we've done it all these crazy ways. I mean, before in the old days, Montgomery County Economic Development was part of the Office of the Executive, right? Well, back in the days when Gilchrist was here, Kramer, Duncan, and part of Ike's term. Okay, and then they put it back out, and that hasn't borne any real fruit. It just hasn't. If I were the executive, I would start by convening a roundtable. Let's start the conversation and figure out what our assets are, what will attract various employers, what will spark economic development.
We don't know that already because it seems like, you could be discussing for a long time when the train leaves.
Well, the tangibles are clear. We have a great education system. We're a relatively safe community. We need some work in our transit systems, the roadways and things. We have vast acres of undeveloped land that could be, rethought, reimagined.
Do you mean the Ag Reserve?
No, not the Ag Reserve. The place that's been sitting forever up on 270. It used to be Comstat, or was it?
Yeah.
Was it Comstat? That's been barren for how long now? I mean, we haven't been able.
Well, they just announced Viva White Oak, so it's not like they're not doing anything.
No, it's not. But think of the places that have sat idle for decades. That's one of them. White Flint, I'm not quite sure what direction that's going in. I think they got a handle on Lake Forest, but there's plenty of opportunity to rethink, redesign. We need to expand on the non-public employment.
We tried Amazon.
Yeah, we did, and that didn't work out.
This is a puzzle. There is a lot of knowledge that is already there to be harvested. For example, we want more apartment buildings built,
right?
Because we have a housing shortage. Housing costs have gone up. But we also have rent stabilization that builders say they don't like. There's a debate. Yeah. And so there is no new project that is coming online, apparently because of the Rent Stabilization Act. If you want more economic development, there are some things that you have to do. If you want more housing that you have to do, there are some things you have to do. And then there are other things you have to do politically in order to house people, which is rent stabilization. And those two things seem to be conflicting, and people don't agree about how to move forward now.
I think that they need to revisit the whole issue of rent stabilization. I agree that renters need relief because the rents are getting excessively high. But if you stop the production, which my understanding from what I'm reading, the rent stabilization, albeit well-intended, right, had produced unintended consequences.
Well, it's not unintended. Everybody knew this was going to happen.
Well, of course they did. Of course they did. We all knew that. But to the folks that was pushing it, I think it was unintended, or maybe they knew all along. But now we're suffering the consequences.
One of the complaints, one of the hits against Montgomery County is that the tax burden is too high relative to other jurisdictions. What is the appropriate level of tax burden?
I don't know what the balance is in terms of taxation. Depending on who you listen to, some argue that our burden here in Montgomery County is not as high as others, right? Especially on the business end, right? Elrich has been making that argument his entire time. And to a certain degree, he makes legitimate arguments. You're going to pay the tax one way or another. The legislature in Florida has voted to eliminate property taxes, but they're going to replace that with a 20% sales tax. There's no free ride. I think the taxes are a part of affordability. What's more challenging for our members in their wage rates is not so much the taxes, it's the cost of the house and the down payment that is the fundamental burden for our members to be able to live where they work. That's what's pushing them to Frederick, Washington County, Pennsylvania, West Virginia. Because if you look at the migration of our members, at one point, probably 80% of our members lived in the county. It's definitely below 50% at the moment. They're all headed north because north is still affordable. Frederick's still barely affordable, but that's going to be off the table soon. When we talk to our members, it's the actual cost of the house and putting together the down payment to get in the house. Those are the two biggest challenges.
Gino Wren, thank you for taking the time. I hope you'll come back.
I will. I always like to sit around and chat about things.
That's all for this episode of I Hate Politics, where we aim to stem the decline in local news by working with community voices. Don't forget to tune in to our Tuesday morning news analysis. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta. Music for this episode comes from the Baltimore woodwind wizard, Seth Keibel. The songs come from his album, No Words. Seth Keibel on clarinet, flute, and tenor saxophone. Sean Lane on piano. Scott Giambuso and Bob Abbott on double bass, Sammy Arifin guitar, Mark Carson and Wes Crawford drums. The album was recorded and mixed by Blake Alfin. You can find Seth Keibel's music at sethkeibel.com. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email producer@ihppod.org. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.